is but a door. Time is but a window.
I recently took a job 90 miles from my home, so I've been driving a lot lately. Watching the procession of repetitive yellow lines, hearing the roar of the road noise, can almost put a person into a trance. And I've been in deep thought about cycles and seasons. I've always been enamored with time. But another peculiar thought keeps creeping into this meditation. Lately, it feels as though time is speeding up. There's some very interesting reasons why I think this phenomenon is real, and I'm going to get into that. But first off, this is just a naturally occurring thing in older people to sense an acceleration in the passage of time, because this is like, say, a month is just a larger percentage of a child's life. But to an elderly person or an older person, it's minuscule, smaller. It's another small speck heaped onto another larger heap of life experience. I'm only 39, and some may call that middle-aged, but to those people I say, shut up. But in all seriousness, it's painful to say, but that plays perfectly into my point, that it does not seem possible that I've been on this earth that long. But I'm seeing this everywhere, even from young people, about this relatively sudden time acceleration. Well, let's just think about exactly what time is for a second. Okay? We feel its procession marching forward endlessly. Now think about what now is, the present. This infinitesimally small, tiny sliver squeezed between a future we cannot access yet and a past we're permanently locked out of once the present moment passes. It's madness to focus on this. It never stops. And if you're really looking to brighten your mood, just meditate on the inescapable prison of passing moments. In all seriousness, though, centuries of thought on this have had poets and philosophers conceptualizing time in many ways, like Marcus Aurelius. Quote, "Time is like a river, made up of the events which happen, and a violent stream. For as soon as a thing has been seen, it is carried away, and another comes in its place, and this too will be carried away." Unquote. One of my favorite bands, Asteroid, has an amazing song titled Time, with the opening line being, "Please let me drown in the rivers of time." Their album, too, is full of symbolic, archetypal subjects and imagery, and if you're into fuzz rock, go check it out, but something about the river analogy stands out. If time is this flowing stream of change, what exists outside of it? As soon as I picture this river in my mind, I'm sort of standing over the stream outside of it. It's as if my mind is instinctually aware that not all of existent reality, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it, can be inside it. There's something outside of it. Something or someone dwells there. Could this be the realm of God, the one who isn't subject to the laws of time? Trying to find a clear definition of time gets fuzzy. Its descriptions often go in circles, and repeating measurements of time in the definition. But physicists get a little more specific. To them, it's more a measure of change in things. The changes should come in a succession of events, predictably spaced, on a pseudo-linear plane. But what happens when that change is no longer spaced out and becomes faster and unpredictable? We've seen more technological change in the last decade than we've seen in the last 1,000 years. I'm just going to be honest. Thinking too deeply about time and what it is and how it quote-unquote behaves hurts my brain. But I think there's something transcendent in our spirits and in our instincts calling out to us and bringing attention to this perceived acceleration. Technology is a huge part of this because we can now cram so many events, so much connectivity into just a few minutes, hours, days, what have you, that more is happening in these last few moments than the same amount of time that preceded it, if that makes any sense. More connectivity, more changes, faster time, at least in perception. Just try this thought experiment sometime. Sit still in a public place and try to be as still mentally and everything else as possible, and just sit and think about all the things that are happening around you. Try to be conscious and aware of it, and think of how slowly you're attempting to move as you're sitting still, and think about all the activity and connections. You know, you've got the Wi-Fi going through, you've got things going through the power lines, phone lines, cars are going by. And if you start to really think deeply about this, you can almost visualize this sort of time lapse around you of how fast things are going. So much is crammed in those few moments that it's just like a time lapse sped up around you, and you're still in regular time. At least that's the way it seems from your perception. I mean, try it sometime. It's pretty interesting, but it's very paradoxical as well, because the time increments themselves aren't really changing. But I digress. So back in ancient times, we had the motion of the heavenly bodies and their depictions encapsulated eons of the used to document events. The sundial emerged, the shadow of our nearest star, seemingly thrusting this shadow onto a device and sort of pushing moments forward. An archaic clock. And the symbols have evolved to include the hourglass, and then modernity brought us the mechanical clock. It's insane to think that most of these symbols lasted millennia. I mean, they created deep archetypal images in people's psyches, and now a few centuries, later, the mechanical clock is now antiquated. After only a few centuries. And we rely on nuclear clocks now that are not only precise, but also embedded in countless electronic devices that have populated our world. It's now incredibly rare for someone to not only have the exact time and date announced to them, but to have it displayed and to be tracked along with every use of this technology. I mean, it's practically strangling us when you really step back and look at what's happening. I think maybe we yearn for the removal of all this tech, a release from it, or maybe even a return to a time before time existed. An ancient mythos speaks of a time before time. The Aboriginal Australian people refer to this as the dream time, or the dreaming. My understanding of it is that it was an unrecognizable ethereal world inhabited by powerful spirits that could will the material world into existence. They tasked themselves with the formation of the world as we know it today, forming rocks and mountains as they sprang forth from the chaotic spiritual sources. Spirits then gave dominion to their next creation, mankind. They set the tribes in their respective dwelling places, gave them hunting tools, knowledge, and another curious gift, the ability to dream, which is of extremely sacred significance to them. The Aboriginal ancestors were said to have passed down this story orally, but also through fascinating, almost psychedelic art depicting the events of the dream time. Now, all this to say, I'm limited in my understanding of this dream myth. And I think the reason it's so fascinating to me is that it's just so deep and mysterious. Many tribal elders comment that Westerners lack the cultural understanding of what this cosmic creation dimension really was. If it existed outside of time, we could posit that it's eternal, still there, out there somewhere around us. Being that I'm still unwilling to ingest the types of drugs that many claim might take me there, I'll have to stick to imagining it and talking about it around the campfire and on the internet.